Hey guys, I'm Georgia and welcome back to my channel for another books I've read recently video where I tell you the 10 books I've read recently. I film a few of these videos a year just to keep you up to date with my reading exploits and to have chats with you in the comments about what books you've been reading and loving as well. These videos never get loads of views, but they do get loads of comments, and that's always like the most important thing. I love our little book community we have here on my channel. It feels like a really well kept secret. I'm very proud to announce I have officially completed my Goodreads challenge of 30 books in 2021, one whole month early, so I'm pretty chuffed with myself for that. I think I'm gonna up it to 35 next year, or maybe even 40 if I'm feeling crazy. Although actually saying that, I am thinking about switching to Storygraph from Goodreads for keeping track of my reading in 2022. So if any of you use Storygraph, please let me know what you think. From what I can gather, it's much more stats based and I love stats. And apparently its algorithm for book recommendations is better, but I am open to suggestions. I haven't really made a Storygraph account, but I'm not committed yet. I'll leave links to both my Goodreads and Storygraph down below if anyone fancies joining me on either of those platforms, and I'll accept you as my friends. But yeah, let me know what you think. Is Storygraph better? I'm not sold. We'll see. I'm feeling very chatty today, as you can probably tell, but like my books videos are the only time on my channel I can actually like show my proper personality and be myself, so we're gonna roll with it. I have 10 books to talk to you about today, and they're a real good bunch of books. I've read some really strong ones towards the end of this year, so we have a couple of 5 stars. We do also have a 1-star book, which is just terrible, but we'll get to that. I've actually had to move back in with Holly's, my girlfriend's parents, as our house sale fell through, and we'd already given up the rent on our flat, and it was a whole nightmare. So when I moved into Holly's parents' house, I was like, I'm gonna chill for a month or two. I'm gonna treat myself to a whole load of books on my Goodreads wishlist, and honestly, I have not disappointed myself. I curated that wishlist so well. I say wishlist, I suppose it's like a to-read list. I curated my to-read list so well that I've just enjoyed all the books. They've been so good. Clearly I know myself, my reading style really well, but also Book Talk. Book Talk has got me through. I am huge on Book Talk at the moment. I love Book Talk. I'm actually thinking about starting my own Book Talk channel or making my own Book Talk videos. I don't know, we'll see. I'll leave my TikTok on the screen somewhere, but also down below. Anyway, enough talking, let's jump in with the first book on my list, The Child Who Never Was by Jane Renshaw. Now this is actually a book I got for free with my Kindle Unlimited membership. I read it on my Kindle. As soon as I see ones I like the look of, I always download them. Kindle Unlimited is so good and so worth the money, I'd say. As long as you're sort of averaging more than 2 books a month with it. I go through phases where I'll have it for 3 months and I'll delete it and then I'll get it. It's really easy to do. I really like it. It's a really good service. Hashtag not sponsored by Kindle, but would be very open to it. Hi Kindle, I'm here. I will say though, you have got to filter through a lot of crap to find the gems on Kindle Unlimited. And like once you kind of know what you're looking for, you can find them quite easily. But there's a lot of rubbish on there. This one was like a shitty gem, like a very average gem. It was good, but it only got like a 3-star review. So this is about Sarah, a woman who's got a lot of trauma, she's badly agoraphobic and seems to be suffering a lot with mental health issues. One day, Sarah wakes up and realises that her son Oliver has gone missing, only to be told by everyone that she doesn't have a son, that the boy she thinks is her son is actually James, the son of her identical twin sister, Evie. Sarah is convinced Oliver is real, that he's hers, but all the odds are sort of stacked up against her as she gets on this mission to get her son back, and literally everyone is telling her that she's crazy. This kid is her twin sister's. As the reader, you honestly don't know what to think. Like, every time I'd become convinced that Oliver was Sarah's, there would be a twist that would make me change my mind. Sarah is a very unreliable narrator, and as the reader, you're right there with her in all her confusion. Like, the premise of this book is really good. The blurb drew me in right away, but I just wasn't blown away by the actual book. I found the storyline to be a bit all over the place at some points. None of the characters were particularly likeable, and it was a little bit slow. I also personally thought like the big twist, or like the answer to who the kid was at least, was a little bit too early in the book, that the rest of it felt a little bit redundant. Like, don't get me wrong, it wasn't a bad book. Like, I paid nothing for it, technically, and I was happy with it, but it could have been better, you know? I don't know. Like, a lot of the time, I felt like the author was working up to this, like, big twist that was going to happen, and then it was just like, nothing, so a bit disappointing at points. Worth a read, wouldn't rush out to buy it. Like, if you got it, you'll read it, you'll enjoy it, but I wouldn't like say, yeah, go read it, it's amazing. You get what I mean? Yeah. We got Costa delivered and I'm just trying to drink it before it goes cold because I'll be very sad if it goes cold. If you want a recommendation for a hot drink from Costa and you don't really like coffee, I'm not a coffee drinker, don't like it, I don't like the taste of it. White hot chocolate from Costa, but with coconut milk. It will change your world, honestly. Apparently the regular hot chocolate with coconut milk is also good. I don't like regular chocolate, I know, blasphemy. But I do like white hot chocolate and it's really good with the coconut milk. That is my recommendation of the day, along with the rest of these books. Next up we have The Guest List by Lucy Foley. Lucy Foley just never disappoints, does she? Like, both this and The Hunting Party by her were thoroughly enjoyable books. And I found this in a local book charity shop for just £1. I was so chuffed. I've written in like my bullet point notes here that I don't actually have the book to show you because I packed all my life belongings away because we're meant to be moving house. But I decided to go and dig and find it, and I did find it, so here we go. This is what it looks like. So this is just like a solid mystery thriller book. This is exactly what you would expect a book like this to be. It's not mind-blowing, it's nothing new, but it's just a solidly enjoyable read. This is the story of a wedding party, so each chapter is from the point of view of a different character. You have the bride, the best man, the wedding planner, etc. You find out very early on, I literally think in the first chapter or two, that someone is dead, and then you're back in time and the rest of the book is sort of build up to who the body is and who the killer is. This is just slow burn storytelling done really, really well. There's a lot of tension, you're sort of on the edge of your seat, and you've got to pay attention to even the smallest hints because these small little things turn out to be big clues later on. In each chapter they're sort of revealing little nuggets of information, but never too much. There was one twist I figured out about halfway through the book, but I still couldn't figure out that twist in like the larger context of the story, so I was pretty happy with that. I say it a lot, but when you are like an avid mystery reader, you start to get really good at picking out what's going to happen next, and I'm always very happy when I don't figure out what's going to happen next. I sped through this one so quickly as these sort of short and sweet chapters from each character really keeps you turning the page, and it's set over the course of only 2 days. And Lucy Foley is so good at setting a scene. It's sort of set on this tiny little island off the coast of Ireland. There's this big storm, it's creepy and atmospheric. It has the perfect amount of like spooky without being downright scary because like I still want to sleep at night. Honestly, if you're a fan of like Agatha Christie, you will love Lucy Foley. I cannot wait to see what she comes out with next. Like, none of her stories are like these brand new storylines. There's never anything hugely controversial, but they're just solid, good mystery thrillers, and I love that. I'm pretty sure this next book was another Kindle Unlimited find, and I loved this, like, for free. This was amazing. This was The Holiday by T.M. Logan, and this was a solid 5-star, maybe 4.5-star rating from me. I love this. The tagline of this book is 7 days, 3 families, 1 killer, and that drew me in straight away. This is a mystery book, but with a twist, because you're not on the hunt for a murderer or somebody who's committed a horrific crime, or at least you don't think you are. This is a very rare mystery book that's suspenseful, but not scary. So it's about Kate, who's on holiday with 3 of her best friends and their families. They've known each other for years, they're super, super close. But shortly after arriving at this fancy villa in the south of France they're staying at for the week, Kate finds a text on her husband's phone that shows that he's having an affair. But not only that, it's clear from the text, with them trying to figure out what to do whilst they're on holiday, that he's having an affair with one of her best friends, like somebody who's on holiday with them. So Kate embarks on this mission to find out the truth, and this is a web that's impossible to untangle. With each chapter, Kate thinks it's a different one of her friends, all of whom have their pros and cons, like everyone is a suspect. And when I tell you, you will not be able to figure out where this story's going, like, you will not be able to figure out where the story's going, or at least I'll be very, very impressed if you can. I read this book at impressive speed. I was actually at the spa for the day. I finished the second half of The Guest List before starting this one, and I finished it before I left that day. Like, I literally couldn't put it down. I probably read it in about 4 hours. And I actually saw on Goodreads a couple of people saying that they found this book slow compared to T.M. Logan's previous ones, so I guess I'm going to have to pick those up too because I am very intrigued. Like, if this was slow, what are his other books like? Her other books? His other books? I don't know if the author's a man or woman. Okay, this is where the video is going to start to get real juicy because this next book was a solid 5-star read and it was actually a booktube find. I can't remember whose channel I was watching, but it was this video about books to get you out of a reading slump, and as soon as she spoke about this book, I was sold, in my basket, done. This is Sadie by Courtney Summers, and it was sold to me as a true crime podcast in book form, and that is literally what it is. Like, literally. This is about a man called Wes McCrae who's working on this small radio segment about small forgotten towns across America when he hears about the story of a 19-year-old girl called Sadie who's gone missing, and he starts a podcast to help search for her. Sadie had had a pretty rough life, and the only thing that got her through was her younger sister Mattie, who she dedicated her life to raising and protecting. When Mattie suddenly is found murdered one day, Sadie just loses it. She's lost her reason for living and she becomes overtaken by the need for revenge. So Sadie disappears and no one back at home knows where she is. But you, as the reader, you do, kinda. The chapters bounce between Wes McCrae speaking on his serialised podcast The Girls about the case, and it's literally written like a podcast. It's really, really clever how it's done. And then the next chapter is Sadie, who's on her mission for revenge. But you as the reader, you don't actually know what the mission is. Like, you can make your guesses, you might be right, but you don't really know what Sadie's doing until later in the book. It's really clever how it's written, sort of you piece together the story through tidbits that Wes finds out in his investigation, like he's always one step behind, and then through what Sadie shares. But it's just like little nuggets of information, enough to keep you turning the page. But warning, because this book is dark. Like, you might think because it's about a teenage girl, it's going to be fluffy and light, full of the trivial problems of teenagedom, but it is absolutely not that. Sadie is this really tough character. She has been through it. It's dark and raw and uncomfortable, and as you start to figure out what happened, you just get this like feeling of dread. It feels so real. It's not one for the lighthearted. I really don't want to spoil the story in any way, but this is as dark as you would expect from any true crime podcast and story. I stayed up until 1 AM finishing this book, and then I couldn't sleep for like an hour because it just made me feel a bit sick and just this like full of dread, anxiety feeling. Like, I really don't want to spoil anything, but if you've read this book, like, you will know the ending. That ending, it's no words. I am going to be thinking about this book for a very long time, and if I recommend any book in this video, I think it's this one. Also, I read it, obviously, I've got the book, but I am very tempted to listen to the audiobook as well, because I have a feeling that'll be amazing. I've seen a lot of people saying the audiobook is really well done. And then next up we have a book talk favourite, We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. I've been wanting to read this one for a really long time. Like, it's been everywhere, hasn't it? And maybe this is very controversial, but I thought this book was just like okay. Like, not particularly bad, not particularly good, just very much meh, okay. But I did have a lot of feelings about the book, so much so that I actually wrote a review on Goodreads, which I literally never do. So I think I'm just going to read that review for you because it's still very relevant. So let me find it and read it for you. I've got my laptop here, so this is what I wrote. I have a lot of thoughts about this book and I never write reviews, but this has to get out of my brain. It's true what everyone says, the ending left me blindsided and I didn't see it coming for even a second. Like, the ending was fantastic, 10 out of 10. However, the rest of the book was a struggle. The only reason I was able to finish it was because it was so short. Like, look how short this book is. I think it's about 200 pages. And I lost the point in my review. Where was I? Oh yeah. So you're left in the dark for the majority of the book, which is the point, I'm sure. But also, I was 50 pages into a 200-page book and I was still thoroughly confused as to who was who and what the plot was even about. If this was 300 plus pages, I probably would have given up. Although I say that, I probably wouldn't because I always fight through to the end, but I wouldn't have been happy about it, you know? The sentences are so short and staccato that I found it quite jarring to read, along with the super short chapters. The style of writing does make sense when you get to the end of the book, but it was just a struggle to get through it all for a 4-page conclusion at the end, which pieced it all together. The ending was great, and I'm sure I'll be thinking about it for a while, but is all the hype deserved? I don't know. Also, I just want to add that I didn't find any of the characters particularly likeable. Like, it's quite frustrating to read when you're not really rooting for anyone. This is a really clever book, but I just struggled too much with the writing to enjoy it. In terms of the plot, it's about a privileged group of cousins who go visit their grandfather on an island that he owned every summer. But I feel like me saying anything more than that is going to spoil the book. So I think you're definitely better off going to this one blind. I'm very intrigued. What did you guys think of this one? Like, I'm very interested to hear because I haven't heard anything other than rave reviews about this. And honestly, I just thought it was a bit meh. Like, it was fine. But it wasn't hype worthy, I don't think. The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. It is true what they say. This book will tear your heart out of your chest. It will rip it into a million pieces and then stomp on it. Like, even now, just thinking about this, it makes my heart physically hurt. Sometimes books get raved and hyped about for a reason, and Song of Achilles deserves every bit of praise it gets. I finished this a month ago and I still think about it every day. So this is about Patroclus, the son of a king who's banished from his kingdom as a young boy and ends up in the kingdom of Peleus, who has a son, Achilles. Achilles is half god, half human. He's every bit as perfect as you would expect him to be, and it's written in the stars that he is to be the greatest of all the warriors. Achilles and Patroclus are kind of just drawn together as children, and they grow up together, they fall in love. This is just the most tender and poetic love story. There's one sentence in it which I think sums up how Madeline Miller writes love, and I just have to read it to you, so I'm gonna read. Had she really thought I would not know him? I could recognise him by touch alone, by smell. I would know him blind, by the way his breaths came and his feet struck the earth. I would know him in death, at the end of the world. Just, what? What? It's so beautiful. I honestly have so many feelings about this book that I'm struggling to form cohesive sentences. The first half of this book is just steeped in this slow growing romance, like you're getting to know and fall in love with the characters as they sort of fall in love with each other. It's gentle and simple and emotional. But then the second half is the Trojan War. You begin to see their flaws and their faults, and you start to really anticipate how this book is going to end. So this book is a retelling of the Iliad, so if you're familiar with Greek mythology, you probably know how this is going to end up. I'm not super up to scratch with my mythology, but as I was reading, I had a feeling that I remembered how it was going to end. I didn't know for sure. I was just holding on to that tiny whisper of hope as I read the book, and it destroys you. It destroys you. I must say that the last couple of chapters of this book are some of the most beautiful, heartbreaking writing I've ever had the pleasure of reading. And no matter how much you brace yourself for the ending, because you know it's coming, it doesn't make the pain any less. I don't usually like fantasy books, I don't usually like romance books unless they're queer, which luckily this one is queer romance. But this is just the best romance I've ever read, and dare I say, it might have even unthroned Aristotle and Dante as my favourite book of all time. I don't know, maybe. It feels blasphemous to even say that, but I just want to hug it. I want to sleep with this every night. I want to be buried with this. I'm very, very tempted to read Madeline Miller's Circe now as well, but I feel like the reason I love this so much was because of the queerness. Is Circe queer? Convince me. Should I read it? Should I not? Let me know. This next book I also gave a 5-star review on Goodreads, but thinking about it now, I'd say maybe it was more of a 4.5 stars. Like, there's just a couple of marks it didn't quite hit, but overall, this is fantastic. This is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. So I don't know how I didn't realise this before I bought this book, but this is actually written in verse. And I'm very glad I didn't realise, because I probably wouldn't have picked this up and I would have missed out on an awesome book. I'm just not a poetry kind of person. It kind of goes over my head, but I found this such a quick and riveting read. I blew through this in literally about 3 hours. And honestly, I wish there'd be more of it. So this is the story of half-sisters Camino and Yera. I think I'm saying her name right, Yera, but only as I'm now saying it aloud, I realise I'm not actually sure of that. You know when you're reading and just like in your head you just pronounce things as they come, but I realise I haven't actually said it aloud. But I think it's Yera. That's how I was pronouncing it in my head. Sorry if it's wrong. Anyway, half-sisters Camino and Yera only find out that the other exists after their father dies in a plane crash whilst travelling between the Dominican Republic and New York City. Turns out he's been living two lives with two separate families. This is a story of grief, of family, of culture. The chapters alternate between the two girls who share blood but live these vastly different lives in their home countries, who live different levels of privilege and poverty. Camino is Dominican, so there's a lot of like Spanish scattered through her chapters, which really gives sort of authenticity and heart to the story. It is quite simple Spanish, and I didn't have much trouble understanding it, either with my basic knowledge or with the sort of surrounding context. And then Yera grew up in New York with her dad. She's a chess champion and he broke her heart, so their relationship kind of fell apart, and it really delves into her feelings of guilt and grief and anger. This is a really powerful read, and I'm definitely going to add more of Elizabeth Acevedo's books to my list because I really love this and I would never have picked this up had I realised. Like, as you can see, oh, the lighting's really funny. There, you can kind of see like how little writing there is on each page. Super quick to read. If you're on Book Talk, you've 100% heard of Colleen Hoover, and I was determined to read one of her books, but I wasn't too sure which. From what I can gather, she writes a lot of straight romance, and I'm not really into straight romance. But when I saw the blurb of Verity, I knew she was my one, and she did not disappoint. Loan Ashley is a writer who's struggling to make ends meet in New York City when she's given the opportunity of a lifetime, sort of that old trope. Famous writer Verity Crawford has been in a serious accident, and a sort of ghostwriter, I suppose, is needed to complete the remaining books in the series that Verity's been writing, and Loan is the chosen one. So she has to go and spend time at the Crawford house to work through all of Verity's notes, figure out where she wanted the series to go, how it was going to end up. But then once Loan is in the Crawford house, weird things start happening. Loan finds an autobiography written by Verity about the truth behind who she really is and what happened when both her twin daughters mysteriously died within the space of 6 months. Loan finds herself in a very weird situation where she's falling for Jeremy, Verity's husband, and she doesn't know whether to share what she's found out with him or not. And throughout the book, you're sort of alternating between Loan's narrative as she lives in the house and then chapters from Verity's autobiography. And honestly, it was the autobiography chapters that had me hooked. They were so well written. Honestly, this book had me on the edge of my seat beginning to end. It's the definition of a page turner. It's spooky and creepy and incredibly disturbing at points. If you have an active imagination, you're going to find yourself sleeping with the lights on after this. Like, my heart was beating so fast at points. The characters are all very disturbed and honestly all very flawed, and that works with the genre and the theme of this book. And this is another one with a fantastic ending. You will not guess where this book is going, I promise you. It is so, so good. But maybe look at trigger warnings for this. I don't say that very often with many books, but this one is quite dark points if you're like sensitive. Yeah. The Henna Wars by Adiba Jegidar. I was about to say this is my first and only YA of the video, but actually I don't think that's the case because I'm pretty sure that We Were Liars is classed as a YA. But this is my first stereotypical fluffy teenage girl YA of this video at least. I think I say it in every video, but I think I'm finally growing out of YA. Maybe. I'm not ready to give up just yet. I keep going back, but I'm sort of getting to the end of my age range of being able to enjoy YA, I think. Now I just find myself rolling my eyes a lot. If 14 or 15-year-old Georgia read this, my mind would have been blown. Like, over a decade ago, there was basically no YA LGBTQ+ fiction. There wasn't really any queer fiction. I'm sure there was some out there, but it certainly wasn't easy to find, and I'm so thankful that the teenagers of this generation have so many queer books out there to now read and love, and not only that, that there's ever-growing diversity and representation within that genre. The Henna Wars is a rom-com about 16-year-old Nishat, who has just come out to her Muslim Bengali parents as a lesbian. She knows who she is and she's very determined to live her truth, which is particularly difficult in Bengali culture and at the Catholic girls' school that she attends in Ireland. I loved how this book intertwines her love for her culture along with the difficulties of living within the Bengali culture in Ireland. Nishat has a love and a talent for henna passed down from her grandmother, and when there's a competition at school to sort of create your own business, she goes on a mission to run a successful henna business. But she runs into a brick wall when Flavia, a beautiful Brazilian girl who Nishat very much has a crush on, decides to start a henna business herself, not listening to Nishat's cries of cultural appropriation. How is she supposed to explore this sort of tangled web of having feelings for Flavia, being mad at her, dealing with her family's disappointment, racism, homophobia, friends not understanding why her culture is so important to her, and get through school as well? Like, this does have all the complexities of being a teenage girl and more. Like, that premise is really cute, right? And the book is fine, but it's just that, it's just fine. It felt to me like a lot of the big problems are kind of just glossed over and solved way too easily at the end. Like, there's a lot of things that I don't think I personally could have forgiven. And some things are so serious and need to be properly resolved, but other things were just such, like, teenage angst problems that took way too long to get resolved. Like, reading this as a 27-year-old, I just wanted to, like, shake Nish out and be like, get over it. But then again, I'm aware I'm not the target audience for this book. For an LGBTQ plus teenage girl, or a Muslim or South Asian or POC LGBTQ plus teenage girl, I think this book would be everything. I gave this a solid 3 stars. I didn't love it, I didn't hate it, I appreciate how amazing this book would be for some people. It's just not written for me as a 27-year-old white LGBTQ plus person. It was cute. And finally we have Nothing Important Happened Today by Will Carver. I hate to end this video on a bummer, but I'm the type of person who has to keep order, and chronologically this was the last book I read, so we're ending on a bummer. This is genuinely one of the worst books I've ever read in my life. A solid 1 star. Awful, awful, awful. I'm fairly easy to please, like even terrible books usually get a 2 star from me, but this would have been 0 stars if possible, and I am baffled because all reviews of this book online seem to be raving about it and I just don't get it. I very, very, very nearly DNF'd it, but I fought through, and for what? Why? Why did I fight through? I'm honestly struggling to even tell you what this book was about. I finished it in bed last night and Hull asked me what happened in it, and I couldn't tell her. This is supposedly the story of a cult, and it sort of opens when 9 people jump off a bridge in London, all sort of leaving behind notes along the same vein. Big suicide trigger warning. Big. Even I found this one rough. Each chapter in this is like a page long. It switches between who each of the jumpers was and this sort of like weird monologue from the person behind it all. Only of course as the reader we don't know who this mysterious person is. This person clearly has some kind of superiority complex, as you'd expect with an alleged cult leader, but the way it's written makes you feel really inadequate as the reader, and I don't think it's intentionally written that way. It's just very patronising and pretentious and very, very smug. Like, random references are made throughout it to serial killers and cult leaders throughout history, and I think the idea is to make you feel stupid for not knowing the references, but obviously I did know the references because of what I do, but it just comes across as very, like, alienating for the reader. Like, I didn't feel like I wanted to carry on reading. I actually was a bit pissed off at the author. Sorry, my camera just died, so if everything suddenly, like, changed, that's why. Even my camera doesn't want to hear any more about this book. Anyway, the worst thing about this was I got to the end with no idea what the motivation was behind the perpetrator here. Like, I got to the end of this horrendous book with 0 answers, and I just don't think that's the way it was meant to be. It's just very unclear and rambly with 0 structure. There's not even any suspense here, seeing as it's supposed to be a mystery thriller book. And it's such a shame, as I really loved the last book I read by Will Carver, Good Samaritans, but I'm genuinely a bit concerned for him after this. I did not like this book, like, at all. I would have burned this, except it's not mine, so I'm not going to, but Nicole, you can have this back. Wouldn't recommend it. So there you go. There are 10 books I've read recently. Please let me know what you thought of any of these books. Like, did you like any of these? Did you not? Have you got different opinions? Let me know. Tell me what books I should add to my to-read list, please. I'm actually, like, kind of getting to the end of it, which is crazy. That's never happened, but I sort of went through it and I culled loads of ones that I wasn't interested in anymore. I bought loads of the ones that I wanted to read. It's like very curated. I'm very happy with myself. Also, let me know if you want to see like a top reads of 2021 video. I'm a bit hesitant because a lot of the top reads will be ones I've just mentioned in this video, so it might be repetitive, but I have got others as well. I'm rambling. Let me know. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.